He was supposed to be the next great American success story. A Marine veteran who pulled himself out of poverty, graduated from Yale Law School, wrote a best-selling memoir, and rode straight to the U.S. Senate. But somewhere between the book tours and the billion-dollar handshakes, James David Vance stopped being himself, if he ever truly knew who that was. Now, as Vice President of the United States at just 40 years old, he stands as perhaps the most manufactured politician in modern American history. And the man holding the strings? A German-born billionaire who once wrote that freedom and democracy are incompatible. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began in 2011 in a lecture hall at Yale Law School, when a young J.D. Vance, still scarred by his Appalachian upbringing, still trying to reconcile his working-class roots with his Ivy League present, heard Peter Thiel speak. Thiel, the PayPal co-founder and Facebook's first major investor, delivered a talk about technological stagnation and the decline of American elites. For Vance, it was an awakening. Years later, he would write that Thiel's talk remains the most significant moment of my time at Yale Law School. But what exactly awakened in that lecture hall? Was it intellectual curiosity, or was it ambition, recognizing opportunity? Because what followed was not the story of an independent thinker finding his voice. It was the story of a blank canvas allowing someone else to paint his future. After graduating, Vance spent a brief, unremarkable stint at a corporate law firm before Thiel plucked him from obscurity and hired him at Mithril Capital, his venture capital fund. While working for Thiel, Vance finished Hillbilly Elegy, the memoir that would make him famous. The book painted a portrait of white working-class America through Vance's own struggles with poverty, addiction in his family, and the cultural decay he witnessed in Ohio and Kentucky. Liberals embraced it after Trump's 2016 victory, desperate to understand the Rust Belt voters who'd swung the election. Conservatives loved it too. It blamed personal agency rather than systemic failures for Appalachian poverty. But there was a problem. Even as Hillbilly Elegy climbed bestseller lists and Netflix turned it into a movie, people who knew those communities began pushing back. Critics argued Vance had exploited his own people's suffering, packaging their pain into a product for coastal elites to consume over wine. University of Wisconsin professors who assigned the book in 2017 noted it offered few justifications for its assertions that problems like opioid addiction or poverty are attributable to personal agency. One graduate student wrote, "Vance doesn't ignore systemic factors because he is unaware. He does so because it fits into his particular worldview, shared by many members of our cultural and political elite, that poor people are to blame for their own poverty." When invited to speak at the University of Wisconsin's Go Big Read program in 2017, Vance canceled at the last minute, citing unforeseen scheduling difficulties. But by then, everyone knew what those difficulties were. Vance was already cozying up to Silicon Valley billionaires and plotting his political future. The man who'd written so movingly about his grandmother and his struggles couldn't be bothered to face the people whose stories he'd commodified. The real Vance, whoever that was disappearing, replaced by something more useful to powerful people. In 2016, as Trump rose to power, Vance was publicly horrified. He called Trump reprehensible. In private messages to a friend, he suggested Trump might be America's Hitler. He said Trump was an idiot and expressed deep concerns about what his presidency would mean. He was, by his own description, a never-Trumper. Then came 2019. Vance moved back to Ohio and founded his own venture capital firm, Naria Capital, with heavy backing from, you guessed it, Peter Thiel and other Silicon Valley titans. He began flirting with a Senate run, and suddenly, inexplicably, the never-Trumper became Trump's most vocal defender. What happened? Did Vance have an honest change of heart? Or did he simply do the math? Trump commanded the Republican base, Thiel wanted influence, and Vance wanted power. In February 2021, Peter Thiel personally escorted Vance to Mar-a-Lago for his first meeting with Donald Trump. It was a political arranged marriage. Trump needed young blood and Silicon Valley money. Thiel needed a proxy in Washington. Vance needed both men's blessing. By 2022, when Vance ran for Senate, Thiel poured a staggering $15 million into his super PAC, the largest individual donation to a single Senate candidate in American history. It wasn't an investment in Vance's ideas, it was an acquisition, and Vance delivered. Once in the Senate, he became Trump's most effective defender, backing election lies, attacking Ukraine aid, and positioning himself as the heir to MAGA. But even as he played the populist, his policy positions revealed whose interests he really served. He opposed the 2017 GOP tax cuts, not because they favored the rich, but because he wanted higher taxes on childless people and capital gains redistribution that benefited Thiel's investments. He proposed progressive-sounding bills with Democrats on railway safety and CEO pay, but they were carefully crafted to benefit specific tech interests while appearing reformist. Every move was calculated, every position triangulated. Vance had become a perfect political instrument, appearing populist to MAGA voters while serving oligarchic interests, seeming independent while being completely controlled, projecting authenticity while being utterly manufactured. Then came the scandals that would define him not as a policy wonk, but as something darker, a man at war with himself and modern American society. In 2021, Vance appeared on Fox News and said something that would haunt him forever. We are effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He specifically called out Kamala Harris, then vice president, for not having biological children. The comment was vicious, misogynistic, and politically suicidal. But it revealed something crucial about Vance: his barely concealed contempt for women who don't conform to his traditional vision. In other interviews, he'd suggested childless people should pay higher taxes, that childless teachers were trying to brainwash the minds of our children, and that not having kids makes people more sociopathic. These weren't off-the-cuff remarks. They were a consistent worldview that women's primary value lies in motherhood, and that those who choose otherwise are threats to society. When Trump selected Vance as his running mate in July 2024, those comments exploded into a full-blown crisis. Women across the political spectrum revolted. Harris's campaign gleefully weaponized them. And then came the memes. Endless, brutal memes about weird J.D. Vance and his obsession with other people's reproductive choices. But the weirdness was just beginning. Within days of his VP nomination, the internet erupted with a completely fabricated rumor that Vance had written in Hillbilly Elegy about having sex with a couch. The claim was absurd, easily debunked, and entirely false. Yet it spread like wildfire. The Associated Press initially published a fact-check headlined, "No, J.D. Vance did not have sex with a couch," but then deleted it, which only made things worse. Democratic politicians began making couch jokes. Tim Walz, Harris's running mate, quipped that he couldn't wait to debate Vance if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. Why did this obvious lie gain such traction? Because it tapped into something people sensed about Vance, that beneath the practiced political persona was something deeply uncomfortable, someone fundamentally at odds with himself. The couch meme wasn't about whether the story was true. It was about whether it felt true. And for millions of Americans, it did. Then came the drag photo. Old pictures surfaced of Vance at a college party, dressed in women's clothing with a blonde wig. His campaign confirmed the photos were real, dismissing them as harmless college fun. But the timing was devastating. Here was a man who'd built his political brand on attacking LGBTQ+ rights, opposing trans visibility, and championing rigid gender roles, and he'd once put on a dress for laughs. The hypocrisy was crushing. Internet sleuths began assembling a theory that Vance's aggressive anti-LGBTQ+ stance wasn't conviction, but compensation. Rumors swirled, particularly online, about whether Vance was closeted. Some pointed to his intensely close relationship with Peter Thiel, who was openly gay. Others noted Vance's reported same-sex experimentation as a teenager. Still others highlighted his strangely detached references to his own wife and children. In one viral clip, he awkwardly said his only accomplishment besides being a senator was being a wife to this beautiful lady here, using feminine language to describe himself in a supposed slip of the tongue. Were these rumors true? Probably not. But they persisted because they made narrative sense. Vance had positioned himself as a culture warrior defending traditional masculinity while exhibiting behavior that seemed at odds with that image. Whether or not he struggled with his sexuality, he clearly struggled with something, an inability to present a coherent, authentic self. And then there was Peter Thiel. The relationship that had made Vance's career was now the subject of intense speculation. Thiel had funded Vance's transformation from venture capitalist to senator. He'd introduced him to Trump. He'd basically purchased him a seat at the table of American power. Some observers described Vance and other Thiel protégés like Blake Masters as extensions of the billionaire, men who owed not just their careers, but their entire political worldviews to Thiel's ideological influence. Thiel's own beliefs are chilling. He's written that freedom and democracy are incompatible, and that women gaining voting rights made capitalist democracy an oxymoron. He advocates for techno-authoritarianism, where a new aristocracy of tech elites rules over the masses. He's poured money into life extension research because he literally wants to live forever. And he's spent decades building a network, the so-called PayPal Mafia, that now populates Trump's administration. Vance isn't just influenced by Thiel's money. He's adopted Thiel's entire intellectual framework: skepticism of democracy, hostility to progressive elites, belief in technological disruption over democratic reform, and a vision of politics as controlled by an enlightened few rather than the many. When Vance speaks about politics, you hear Thiel's voice. When he proposes policy, you see Thiel's interests. When he positions himself for the future, you glimpse Thiel's long game. The speculation turned darker as Vance's vice presidency unfolded. Some wondered whether Vance even lived with his wife Usha full-time. Trump himself began openly mocking Vance, joking at events that, "You are so lucky I am with you, Elon," and making pointed remarks about loyalty. Trump's aides deliberately seated Vance away from the president at key events. The relationship was fraying. Why? Because Trump, a master of reading people, had realized what everyone suspected. Vance wasn't real. He was a construction, and constructions break under pressure. When government shutdown negotiations exploded in December 2024, Vance was caught in the middle of the Elon Musk-Trump power struggle, looking weak and indecisive. When Trump began attacking immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, Vance's home state, with false claims that Haitian migrants were eating people's pets, Vance amplified the lies. It didn't matter that Springfield's Republican mayor and Ohio's Republican governor debunked the claims. It didn't matter that bomb threats followed and legal immigrants were harassed. Vance repeated the lies because that's what was required. He'd traded authenticity for power and discovered that power without authenticity is just servitude. Even his charity work reveals the pattern. Vance founded Our Ohio Renewal, supposedly to address the opioid crisis ravaging communities like the ones he'd grown up in. But according to ProPublica investigations, the foundation's biggest accomplishment was tainted by connections to Purdue Pharma, the company that created the opioid crisis. As of 2024, the foundation hadn't spent any funds since 2019. It was another manufactured image, the hometown hero giving back, when in reality, he'd moved on to more lucrative pursuits. By 2025, Trump's health was reportedly deteriorating. Analysts began discussing the possibility of a Vance presidency, and that's when the speculation reached its terrifying conclusion. Was this the plan all along? Had Thiel, unable to directly gain power himself, created Vance as a vessel, someone who would assume the presidency and implement Thiel's techno-authoritarian vision? Vance's positions line up perfectly with Thiel's interests. He opposes aid to Ukraine, aligning with Thiel's strange admiration for Vladimir Putin's model of governance. He supports gutting federal regulatory agencies, which would benefit Thiel's companies. He advocates for restricting democracy in favor of competent leadership, exactly Thiel's philosophy. He even echoes Thiel's attacks on woke universities and progressive institutions. If Vance becomes president, whether through Trump's incapacitation or as the 2028 nominee, he would bring Thiel's entire network into power. The PayPal mafia would run America. Ken Howery as ambassador, David Sachs as AI czar. Thiel protégés throughout the administration. It wouldn't be democracy, it would be oligarchy laundered through electoral politics. And yet, there's a twist. Some speculate that Thiel himself might come to regret his creation, because Vance, for all his manufactured personas, remains fundamentally unstable. His approval ratings are historically low. His viral moments are disasters. His attempts to connect with voters produce cringe. He's trying to be Trump without Trump's charisma, Thiel without Thiel's intelligence, and himself without knowing who that is. When pressed on who he really is, Vance has no answer. Is he the hillbilly from Appalachia? That's marketing. Is he the Yale law intellectual? That's costume. Is he the Silicon Valley venture capitalist? That's transactional. Is he the MAGA warrior? That's performance. Is he the never-Trumper turned Trump loyalist? That's opportunism. The speculation that haunts Vance isn't about any single scandal. The couch joke, the drag photo, the cat lady's comment, the Thiel dependency. It's about the fundamental question no one can answer. Who is J.D. Vance when he's alone? What does he actually believe? What would he do with real power? The terrifying answer might be nothing, because J.D. Vance, as we know him, doesn't exist. He's a composite character, written by Peter Thiel, performed by a man desperate for significance, and marketed to an American public that craves authenticity but settles for convincing fakes. In late 2024, a Yale Law School classmate leaked private communications with Vance from 2014 to 2017, showing him expressing progressive views, doubting conservatism, and privately mocking many positions he now publicly champions. The friend said Vance had completely changed his opinions on fundamental issues. But had he? Or had he simply never had fixed opinions, just ambitions he was willing to mold to whoever could help him achieve them? The scariest speculation isn't that Vance is hiding something, it's that there's nothing to hide. That beneath the scandals and contradictions and manufactured personas is simply emptiness, a man who became whatever powerful people needed him to be, until he forgot how to be anything else. And if that empty vessel ever sits in the Oval Office, who will be speaking through him? Peter Thiel, pulling strings from behind billions of dollars? Trump's ghost, demanding loyalty from beyond the political grave? Silicon Valley oligarchs, reshaping America in their image? Or will Vance, finally alone with ultimate power, discover he has no idea what to do with it because he never developed actual convictions, just profitable positions? America has had manufactured politicians before, but never one manufactured so obviously, so completely, and with such vast resources. J.D. Vance is an experiment. Can you build a vice president from scratch? bypass authentic political development, and install someone at the highest levels of power simply through money and networking? The experiment is succeeding. But as any scientist knows, successful experiments often have unintended consequences. And when the experiment is a human being with access to nuclear codes and the world's most powerful military, those consequences could be catastrophic. The speculation surrounding J.D. Vance will continue because it must. When someone's entire public life is performance, when every position seems calculated rather than felt, when every relationship appears transactional, people search for the truth underneath. They want to believe there's something real beneath the construction. But what if there isn't? What if J.D. Vance is proof that in modern America, you don't need authenticity to reach the highest office? You just need the right billionaire, the right story, and the willingness to become whoever you need to be? That might be the most disturbing speculation of all.